Today I'm filming from L'Oréal headquarters in Paris, and I'm sharing a very rare glimpse into the minds of two exceptional skincare scientists. Dr. Patricia Brieva, PhD, is Vice President Global Medical for SkinCeuticals. She spent 13 years in R&I and worked in formulations for SkinCeuticals, CeraVe, and La Roche-Posay. Dr. Stephen Lynch, PhD, is the head of skincare scientific valorization at L'Oréal USA. He oversees product development, clinical testing, and ingredient strategy for brands including SkinCeuticals, CeraVe, and La Roche-Posay. I've had the privilege of working with each of them for many years now, and after every project we've worked on together, I feel both inspired and informed on a completely different level. The skincare market is full of extraordinary claims. We're told our skin should look better in days. It should glow faster, be smooth quicker, and correct sooner. One of the most important distinctions I want to set at the very start of today's conversation is the difference between short-term visible change and long-term skin health. Something that looks good quickly doesn't always mean that the skin is functioning better beneath the surface. And that brings me to the deeper question that's behind this episode. What does it actually take to create, to prove, and to manufacture world-leading active skincare? What decisions are made long before a product ever reaches your hands? And how do responsible R&D teams decide when to move forward and when to stop? And we'd really appreciate if you like this episode to please like, subscribe, and leave a review, and share with someone you love. Patty and Steve, thank you so much for joining me on Ageless here in Paris at L'Oréal headquarters. You two have worked extensively in ingredients and formulation and bringing incredible products to market. Of course, one of your leadership aspects are in antioxidants. And I think antioxidants is an area within skincare that is often misunderstood, and there are so many myths. Steve, I'm going to start with you from a lab perspective, all the way through to consumer. What are some of the top myths that you want to debunk about antioxidants?
One myth is that, if it's colored, it's probably bad, right? I just like to say, from a scientific point of view, from a chemistry point of view, the same elements that make antioxidants good antioxidants, the same properties, also bring about, sometimes some colors. It's the unique chemical structure of like a lot of the different molecules, right? So antioxidants tend to be sometimes unstable, right? That's what makes them a good antioxidant. So even with the best formulation techniques, sometimes antioxidants, they might have a little bit of color, they might have a little bit of fragrance to them as well, depending on the antioxidants. And, that's okay. Like, this is what helps make them efficacious.
So when we're talking about antioxidants, what are some of your favorite antioxidants that you test as ingredients and work with?
We have the classic ones, for instance, vitamin C. I mean, this is like the go-to. One that I really like that I think is often overlooked is resveratrol, right? So I think that this is one that, it's a really great antioxidant, but I think it has a lot of other synergies with some of the other pathways that can activate. And I love antioxidants that are sort of multitasking.
I'd like to ask you a little bit more about resveratrol. So would you recommend resveratrol at night?
Yes. Yeah. I think this is one that we would recommend to use at night.
Why?
So I just mentioned some of the instabilities of antioxidants, and resveratrol is one that, as great as it is, it could have a little bit of photo instability, right? And so it's often recommended to use this at night, wear a sunscreen, the same kind of recommendations you would typically have when using retinol, for instance.
And so Steve just mentioned color. I know that you've been involved in a publication around the big question of colour of an antioxidant serum and if it's remained efficacious. Patty, what else can you share about that study?
Well, I think a couple myths also, antioxidants can quench many different things. So there's different oxide species. There's hydroxy, ones that are, more peroxides. And when we look at antioxidants, sometimes you can't just say one antioxidant that will do everything. You need a combination of antioxidants. And this is an example of the recent publication where we're looking at vitamin C, E, and F for ferulic acid. And you really look at how they can quench and mitigate some of the UV damage that can be done. So, for us, we were really proud because we saw that the publication showed efficacious levels of 3 different antioxidants and how they're able to quench some of this mitigation of oxidative damage that can happen.
Yes, and colour, if once it's in the bottle, it's been opened, and how long can it be used for?
So for our pure vitamin C, CEF, we have what we call a product opening of 6 months. So once you open that seal, you expose it to air, you want to use that product 6 months. Again, we've done the amount that you should use daily, so that should be no issue to use it every 6 months. But we had the fun experiment of doing it when it was closed and opened, and for the open bottle, we would take pipettes of what you would use daily to mimic a real life scenario.
So when consumers talk about oxidation, what do you want to really help them understand when it comes to antioxidant serums?
Okay, so for example, you're out in the sun, you're able to put a little bit of vitamin C. You can mitigate some of that redness by using vitamin C earlier. And this is usually why we ask consumers to use it in the morning.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Steve, can I ask you about percentages? So different products, sometimes they'll have 20%, 15%, 10%. How do you choose? I know perhaps later on in formulation, but how does it affect, how important is the percentage to a product?
I think it's very important, especially considering, I guess the first question is to ask yourself, who is your end user? And, what's the benefit you want, right? When it comes to antioxidants, I think we'd like to have people use sort of the maximum amount of antioxidant that they could tolerate. And, you're using this on a daily basis, right? So we've done many studies in the past. I mean, famously, Dr. Pinnell did plenty of studies with vitamin C, right? Looking at all the different dosages, understanding what provided like the maximum benefit, at the maximum tolerability.
Yes, yes. I remember working on the advisory board with you for Silymarin, and I was so fascinated. I felt that in my clinical practice, that was a huge game-changing moment when you worked on those ingredients and that formulation, because in clinical practice, there were patients who did have the oilier skin type, who didn't tolerate, for instance, the vitamin E that was in C E Ferulic. And so it really helped a lot of those patients.
And I'm really glad. Like that was a fun advisory board. I'm glad the product is helpful. I'd like to reflect on the comment Patty made a moment ago about different types of free radicals, different antioxidants being used for different purposes. And Silymarin was so unique because it really solved this problem around specifically lipid oxidation, right? And again, we don't need to use maybe 15% of Silymarin, right? Yeah. We're delivering more to the surface of the skin, like the lipids. So, depending on the targeted usage, the targeted delivery area, like the purpose, like we can tune the level of antioxidant we think is appropriate.
That's really helpful. I remember that advice very, very well. I want to ask you about hyaluronic acid. It's everywhere, right? In terms of topicals, creams, serums, and there's a lot of claims, and it can be very attractive to many patients and consumers. It's a really large molecule, right?
It is.
How do you formulate a product and test it in order for it to actually pass through the skin barrier, for it to actually biologically impact skin?
Okay, so it's a big topic. It's one of, the classic controversies in skincare, right? So I think it's a big molecule, and chances are we're going to have minimal skin penetration from hyaluronic acid itself. So when we are formulating a product, for instance, HA intensifier, right, or multiglycan,
Yes.
we largely rely on other mechanisms for increasing the HA within your skin, right? So yes, we wanted to have a healthy portion of HA within the product, but we never imagined that we would drive all of this HA into your skin. Instead, really having other ingredients, proxylane, for instance, that are helping to stimulate the HA within your skin, right? And other ingredients that might help to suppress the breakdown of HA within your skin, right? And so this multi-pronged approach, right? I think it's about having, realistic expectations for our product. And I think the product is quite efficacious, right? We have studies that prove that. And so I think it goes back to our scientific approach, what's real, what's not real, and really letting some of our experiments in science do the talking.
That's a really useful way of thinking about hyaluronic acid and actually stimulating the patient's own hyaluronic acid and helping to reduce the breakdown of it. It's something that I talk about a lot with my patients, and I know, Patty, you'll be interested in this, is that I found it a very powerful tool when I'm injecting hyaluronic acid directly into the dermis with my patients. And, I've published on various different mechanisms with it, but when I combine the two integratively, it can really help with the patient's efficacy. And again, on PROs, I've mentioned 9 months later, patients are still saying that they're getting improved perceived hydration.
That's amazing. And another element is, and I love the idea because we were mitigating some of the diminishing HA, we were stimulating it, we added HA, but not all HAs are the same. And I think this is another element, and you see this in your fillers, right? You see the rheology of an HA. And in HA intensifier, we have the typical HA Dalton size, have a fragmented HA, and there's also an encapsulated HA. Back to not all HAs are the same, and they do have different hydration properties, physical chemistry. And I think a lot of the time they act as a humectant at the barrier at the top, and then, like you were saying, and then it's complemented with the fillers that are also helping the endogenous underneath.
And I have one more comment, right? So HA gets all the love, but we can't forget about the other important gags, right, that are within the skin.
Yes.
The whole family of sulfated gags and everything. So there's a lot more to our matrix than just HA.
Yes, right? Yes. I completely agree with you. The other thing I think about it is that it's so well tolerated as a product.
It really is.
Is that difficult to achieve?
There's a couple ingredients that we feel are very efficacious and safe and tolerable, and I think HA is one of them. But you're right; it could be rare, especially when it's an efficacious ingredient.
Yeah. Peptides, there's a craze everywhere. We know that there are many, many different types of peptides. Patty, what do you think consumers need to know about peptides in skincare?
So I think they need to understand why they're using the peptide. And I think for us, there's a lot of different peptides, and I would just can classify them, and broadly.
That's helpful.
We have more of the neuromuscular peptides, right? The ones that are helping to mitigate some of those wrinkles, and we have them in PTOX.
Yes.
Then we have peptides that are there to stimulate elastin and collagen, and helps a lot of, and it's in our anti-aging products. Then you have peptides who are carriers to trace minerals that are going to help, some of the enzyme reactions, to mitigate some of the aging. Then we go into a lot of them that Steve's worked on with phyto and the AMPs, peptides and the antimicrobial ones. And I think when you use the word peptide, you just need to understand why you have these peptides, what's this functionality, what concentration is it, and what's the efficacy behind the product itself, and how is it formulated.
Really interesting. Yeah, PTOX has been a fascinating product to work with throughout the different stages of the last few years, and still testing and finding new ways of utilizing it, integratively in clinical practice, for sure. I mean, it's become such a huge product for you worldwide, hasn't it? Yeah, extraordinary. Steve, anything else about peptides? Are there any other ones to watch out for, or any polls from a lab perspective?
Yeah, so I think that Patty did a great job outlining the different types, and I totally agree. We have to understand, what are these peptides for? I feel like today in the marketplace, there's almost it's like a contest, like who can have more peptides, right? And so I think the approach of carefully selecting, a proven peptide. We do a lot of research on the peptides that we use in our formulation, right? And understand why it's there. We put it at an efficacious level, right? And, if we combine 1 or 2 or 3 peptides, like in most cases, like this is probably, you're getting a nice complementary effect, and some benefits. Do I need to have 5 or 7 or 9 peptides? Like, I think at a certain point, there might be a diminishing return on that.
I see. And you feel that peptides do have relevance within the skin longevity space?
I do. I think peptides are great ingredients, right? So, I mean, they're like tiny messengers for the skin, right? I think they do help stimulate certain processes. So again, it's a type of ingredient. We touched on the concept for HA about, stimulating your own skin to improve certain processes. And I think ingredients that work like that can be really beneficial.
Steve, just really top line, obviously polynucleotides and exosomes have absolutely exploded over the last 2 years. From a skincare perspective, what are your thoughts?
I think this is a really promising area, right? So really interesting science, really complicated science, right? So I think there could be some really nice avenues going forward. We have to get the science right.
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of work ongoing there. I would say check back in the future.
Thank you. And then moving on from that, is there anything you can share in terms of what you're excited about going forward, either within your pipelines or even further on from that, conceptually within skincare?
I think for us, we have a very strong pipeline. So we're super excited. We are reviewing several tests, I would say, on our new couple products, at least 9 tests for each product. We have new mechanisms of action. We're really focusing on a longevity, in the longevity space. Yeah, I think we hit the ground with,
Okay.
We have a very strong pipeline.
Okay. I have one last question for you both. What does ageless mean to you, Patty?
Ageless is to maintain your self, whether it's inside, endogenous, or external. So for me, it's someone who is maintaining their self.
Okay. And you, Steve, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it means maintaining myself at the age that I want to be.
Okay. Thank you so much to both of you for taking the time. I know it's extremely busy here at the moment, so this is a rare insight and extremely valuable for consumers and patients. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
To have access to the insights of these 2 incredible scientists is extremely rare. And so what I want to leave you with is how to see beyond the cosmetic illusions and how to start differentiating quality of skincare in an overcrowded market. Choosing high-quality active formulations with proof and being consistent with it is where real skin health lives. Here's 2 takeaways. Number 1, give your skincare time. One of the most important things to understand is that meaningful biological change in the skin doesn't happen overnight. When using a formulation that's evidence-led and you're consistent with it, repeated applications compound quietly over time. Barrier support, inflammation control, and increased cellular communication can take weeks, not days. When we expect instant results, we often abandon products just as the biology is beginning to improve. So stick with it. Number 2, prioritize proven active ingredients where you can. Skincare can be expensive, and it's understandable to reach for lower cost options. But products with little or no biological impact often become a false economy. What looks like saving in the short term can mean repeated spending without any meaningful skin change. When possible, think of skincare as an investment in skin health, choosing fewer products with proven actives and credible formulations rather than many that just simply feel good. In my Clinic 1 Aesthetic Studio, detailed skincare consultations are available with qualified clinicians that can help diagnose and guide your skincare protocol. If you found this conversation valuable, please subscribe, share it with someone you care about, and let us know the questions that you want answered in future episodes. As a thank you for being here, you can redeem an exclusive 15% discount off SkinCeutical products from my clinic online. Follow the link in the show notes and enter the code SkinC15 for 15% off. Together, we're redefining how we age, look, live, and feel. I'm Dr. Jonquille Chantrey, and this has been Ageless.